From the Missouri School of Journalism, welcome to Global Journalist. I'm David Reed. By the end of next year, the war in Afghanistan will be over. The 60,000 plus remaining U.S. soldiers will be brought home. But the war on terror that started after al-Qaeda's attacks on September 11, 2001, will continue indefinitely. There is no end in sight. Our program today will focus on the covert operations that changed the course of the war on terror. Hidden battles at night and night raids taking place in Afghanistan, Yemen, Somalia, and other areas where Islamist militants are operating. Filmmaker Richard Rowley and investigative journalist Jeremy Scahill call these dirty wars, and that's the name of their documentary film being screened this weekend at the True False Film Festival in Columbia, Missouri. Rowley and Scahill are joining us by telephone from New York City to talk about their film. The film turns into a global investigation of the secretive and powerful Joint Special Operations Command. But let's start where the film does, with Jeremy's reporting on a deadly U.S. night raid in a corner of Afghanistan. So, Jeremy, tell us about you were trying to get away from the embedded journalists in Kabul and find out what was going on with some of these reports of casualties in the hinterlands. Can you tell us what was happening?
Yeah, thank you for having us. It's interesting. You noted at the beginning of the program that next year the war in Afghanistan is going to be coming to an end, and that definitely is the message that's being projected from the White House and seems to be the interpretation in most of the chambers of Congress. But the reality is that there's a sort of secret war buried within the larger war in Afghanistan, and that's this war with special operations troops conducting hits that are based on taking out people that are on a U.S. kill list, and there's over 2,000 of them on this list in Afghanistan, and some of them are known al-Qaeda figures, but most of them are sort of mid to low-level Taliban commanders or people that have loosely been characterized as militants. So what you're going to see, even when the conventional army leaves, the massive number of U.S. troops there, when they pull out, this smaller war buried within the bigger conventional war is going to continue on. And Rick had been reporting in Afghanistan for quite some time, and he and I started working together there. I mean, we'd been working together for a decade in various places around the world, but we went to Afghanistan together in 2010, and what we noticed was that there was this sort of shadow war. And what we really, I think, stumbled into was the beginning of a real escalation of this kill campaign in Afghanistan, and we investigated this particularly gruesome raid that we had heard about where U.S. Special Operations Forces came into a home in this city of Gardez, just outside of the city of Gardez in Paktia province, not far from the Pakistan border, and two pregnant women were killed in that raid, and a senior Afghan police commander who had been trained by the U.S. military and by private U.S. military companies. And we went there, and when we started to investigate who was behind the raid, it was sort of like pulling on an elephant's tail, and the elephant is hidden behind a wall. And we realized that it was this elite unit that reports directly to the White House that has sort of been only whispered about in the corners of the chambers of power in Washington for 2 decades. And here they were in Afghanistan kicking down the doors of a family in Gardez. And so that began an investigation that took us to Somalia and Yemen and elsewhere.
Yeah, but in the beginning, Rick, you and Jeremy thought this was just going to be a story about the night raids in Afghanistan?
Yeah, absolutely. In the very beginning, we thought that this was a film about the dark side of the war in Afghanistan, about how, we'd seen that the conventional war there with the hundreds and thousands of conventional troops was being eclipsed by a covert war. So, the more Afghans were being killed and captured in night raids that we know nothing about than by the entire conventional force there. So we went there believing that this was an investigation, and we did not, I never thought that when we were standing there in the courtyard in Gardez talking to the Afghan victims of an American night raid, that the story would end up taking us to the streets of Yemen, or of Sana'a, Yemen, or to Somalia, or that we would end up talking to the family of American victims in these very same ways.
Right, and Jeremy, you when you were first trying to report this story, there were a lot of roadblocks thrown in your way. Isn't that right?
Yeah, just to list a couple of them. For one thing, I got banned from Pakistan, and the Pakistani government wouldn't give me a visa for some of the early reporting that I did. on this story. And then as far as the U.S. government was concerned, the first time that I did a story for The Nation magazine about JSOC, I received this call out of the blue on my cell phone the night before the magazine was going to press from a captain in the U.S. military who was the senior aide to the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the senior, military advisor to the President of the United States. And he told me, he wouldn't tell me how I got my number, and he said, if you publish this, you're going to be on thin ice, and he wouldn't clarify what he meant by that. My computer got hacked. I mean, you see all of this in the film and other details, but it's very clear that Rick and I had sort of hit a nerve, and
Right.
a lot of doors were being slammed in our face, and we had to just keep going.
Okay, I just wanted to go back. JSOC. I wanted to explain to our listeners and viewers what JSOC is.
Right.
Jeremy, can you just explain? Because I know you
Right.
learned about it in the course of reporting for this documentary. But if you could give us kind of a synopsis of what they are and when they started back in 1980.
Right. So, JSOC was formed. Actually, Argo just won the Oscar for Best Picture, and it was around the time of that story, when the American hostages were taken, that JSOC was formed, and the idea behind JSOC was to try to have an all-star team of the U.S. military that would draw the best commandos from every branch of the U.S. military and put them under one umbrella, and that they would be used for surgical operations, to deal with hostage situations, to do counter-proliferation on weapons of mass destruction, and could be used discreetly in wars in Central and Latin America or to go into Central Asia. And the idea was that they were going to be this sort of A-team that no one would ever talk about, that would, by its very nature, report only to the White House. And for much of JSOC's history before 9/11, they were used in a very sporadic, targeted surgical way by various U.S. presidents. When 9/11 happened and the U.S., essentially the President of the United States, George Bush, declared a global war and said the world is a battlefield, they turned to JSOC to be at the sort of tip of the spear of that war in hunting down the people that were identified as being responsible for the 9/11 attacks. Well, what began as a targeted operation quickly morphed into occupying Iraq, having tens of thousands of soldiers in Afghanistan, having the CIA set up secret prisons, and JSOC, which had only been a few hundred guys at any given time, the ranks of it started to swell. More and more guys were being trained, and they were given effectively a carte blanche mission to wage this global war in secret with almost no oversight whatsoever, to the point where today JSOC is operating in, it's over 100 countries around the world, conducting operations that the U.S. Congress knows almost nothing about.
And how has it changed under the Obama administration? Has it gotten...
Well, it's funny because when Osama bin Laden was killed, JSOC started to become a known entity, and SEAL Team 6, which is one of what they call the special mission units of JSOC, the most elite units, Disney tried to trademark SEAL Team 6, and Hollywood movies are being made about these guys and video games. But the reality is that, under President Obama, JSOC has been more empowered than they were under President Bush. And I think you could make an argument that in the words of one JSOC guy that I talked to, President Obama has sort of let them off the leash. And I think that the fact that Obama is a constitutional law expert, is a popular Democratic president, the net effect of his presidency on this question of special operations forces has been to legitimize them more than a President McCain ever would have been able to.
Right.
President Obama has made drone strikes and targeted killing operations popular among a majority of self-identified liberal Democrats. So, I think that there's a 1-2 punch here. Part of it has to do with empowering that group of men and a small number of women within that community. And on the other hand, really kind of shoring up the support of a liberal base that was very much disillusioned with these same policies when Bush was implementing them.
Right. And Jeremy, I know you have to break away in just a couple of minutes, but let me ask you just a few quick questions. The film is really personal. I mean, you are the protagonist. You are shown it is your journey to finding out about these what you call the dirty wars and JSOC and the wider use of this. Why did you decide to do it that way? And what do you think that says about the objectivity? I know
Well, I mean, if you like looked at the body of work that I've done over the past 15 or so years of reporting from different places around the world, I almost never write articles in the first person. I don't put myself into the story. That's never been my style. But to answer your question very candidly, as Rick and I were experiencing this sort of journey together, we realized how sort of profoundly it had changed us as people and as journalists. And I think, we started off trying to tell it in a very different way, but it always rang hollow, or it rang, it didn't ring like the whole story. It felt like we were acting as though we were just, sort of independent observers who had no skin in the game. And I think at some point we came to realize that unless we tell the whole story and how it affected us, that it wasn't going to ring totally true. So, I think we told this story in the most sincere way that we could. And, I don't believe there is a such thing as an objective journalist. I don't think there's he said, she said journalism. I think, I think we have a smarter media culture now in some ways. It's dumbed down in other ways with infotainment. But I think that people will respect you if you make clear this is where I stand. And I don't pretend to be an Associated Press reporter who's just saying, well, there's this way of looking at it and there's that way of looking at it. We try to tell a story that would ring true and would resonate with people and would do justice to the people that we met along the way in trying to tell their stories.
And it was a very difficult decision to make. I mean, it took a long time and a lot of soul searching because Jeremy, has resisted to the last, like becoming a protagonist in this. But it was needed for a couple of reasons. I mean, first, as he said, that the story would be incomplete and it would be kind of like lying to pretend like we could go and see and film these things and talk to these people and not be touched and moved and changed by them. But also because for an American audience, I mean, we wanted to make these people real, make them human beings, make their stories matter. And you need a point of entry and a thread that stitches them together in a way to make it coherent, make it resonate, make it deep and powerful for people. Mm-hmm. And Jeremy, I mean, it's a very brave move to get out from behind the camera and go in front of it and turn yourself into the vehicle through which people are allowed to experience these stories. And so, yeah, I mean, that was why we had to do it.
Jeremy, one last question before you have to leave, and
Sure.
Rick will stay with us. But speaking of bravery, you spent a decade as reporting from war zones, but in this movie, you were behind the lines with a Somali warlord, and you were in some pretty tight spots. Did you ever fear for your life when you were making this movie?
Well, I should say, I mean, this happens a lot when the person who's in front of the camera is often looked at as the sort of, the person who is responsible for everything. I mean, what's remarkable to me, I mean, I've worked with Rick for, as I said, more than a decade, and Rick has spent far more time in war zones than I have. And cameramen are killed more often than any other media people. And, there were times in Somalia where Rick would be filming me and someone, and I would see tracer fire hitting a concrete barrier behind Rick. People were trying to shoot Rick in Somalia, and I would see it, and it's this terrifying moment where this person, I mean, Rick and I became like family in the course of doing this. You see him unflinching taking these photos, and it's like 2 inches above where those bullets are hitting. That hits Rick in the spine, and to me, those were some of the most terrifying things. Watching Rick, I mean, I would be in. You see these shots in our film of the streets of Mogadishu, the most dangerous city in the world. I'm sitting inside of a car that has armored plating on it. Rick is on the back of a car with Somali militia guys filming out in the open. 2 weeks after we left Somalia from that shoot, a cameraman was killed in the very place where Rick was doing exactly what he was doing. So, and the other thing I'll say so I would say Rick took much bigger risks than me and always has. But the other thing is the local folks that we work with, whether it's in Somalia or Yemen or Afghanistan or Iraq, they take much greater risks, and they represent the vast majority of the journalist deaths in these war zones. It's people whose names you never hear and who are never invited on cable talk shows. Those are the real heroes of our film, and you really don't see them because that's not the kind of people that they are. They're out there working in the trenches every day to make it so that journalists who come from a country where these policy decisions matter can tell those stories. And I mean, to us, we always say this when we show our film, right at the beginning of the talkback. Mm-hmm. We say, look at this, look at the credit roll on this film, and all of the names on it, because those are the people that made this film. We're going to get the credit for it, but those are the people that made this film, and we try to be very respectful of everyone who took risks so that we could tell the story, and we stay in touch with them.
Great.
And they know that this is happening, and they're just excited about the possibility that people in this country will know their story.
Now, Rick, did you consider that the dangers would outweigh what the movie could accomplish? Is that what helped keep you going? You really wanted to tell this story and were willing to risk your life to tell it?
Well, I became a war reporter because of the Iraq War, because it felt to me like these wars that we were fighting in Iraq, Afghanistan, and now this sort of expanding covert global war on terror were the most important stories of our generation. And there were stories that were only being told from one perspective. I mean, there were a lot of cameras rolled into Baghdad embedded with U.S. troops, but we don't have footage filmed on the other side of the Iraqi civilians who were living in the city when it was overrun. So, we became, I think I speak for Jeremy too in this, we became war reporters because we felt that these were incredibly important stories and issues for the American people, but they were stories that weren't being told and wouldn't be told if people like us didn't go and take risks to tell them. I feel a huge responsibility. I mean, we're all part of this war. We're implicated in it. We're implicated in the violence that happens in Somalia and Yemen, and we're implicated in these night raids. These wars are being fought in our name all around the world, and they're being fought in our name but without our knowledge. So what this film, Dirty Wars, tries to do is to take that massive covert war, that war being fought in 70 countries around the world, that's being fought in your and my name, but without our knowledge, without any oversight by Congress, without any discussion in the media, and bring it into the public eye so there can be a discussion, a debate about it, because it's only going to expand. I mean, part of the way that this war continues and as violence spirals is because it happens in secret, and because there is no check ever brought to bear on this process. So, I mean, that was the kind of passion that motivated the creation of the film and the risks that were taken.
Right, and the film delves pretty deeply into public policy. What did you try to do to keep the attention of your audience? I know you've gotten rave reviews for your soundtrack with the Kronos Quartet, and the cinematography has been praised as well. But tell me about how you kind of wanted to keep the viewer's attention through some of these pretty intricate details of the covert operations and how they work and who approves them and such.
Yeah, well, we wanted the film to unfold like a narrative feature, like a big, a mystery and an action film, and we wanted it to be a film that had all of that depth and that emotional power that Hollywood features can have, but was passionately committed to the true and the factual and to all of the reasons why we became reporters in the first place. So yeah, I mean, the film, I don't really like the word documentary. Mm-hmm. Even, it makes us sound like what we're doing. We're just stenographers or we're archivists keeping track of things for posterity. When we're telling stories like other people are. Our stories are just real and true. So yeah, I mean, and actually a huge part of this process, the unsung heroes of this process are the documentary writers. Mm-hmm. Because for a long time people didn't even want to recognize that there was writing involved in this. But in order to craft a nonfiction narrative that arcs through all of the complexity and detail and violence and chaos of the world that we see in film and work in, you need to very carefully, craft that arc and figure out a way to make it land and make it mean something to people instead of just being bewildering and disempowering. So David Riker, who co-wrote the film with Jeremy, did an incredible job of helping us to turn what could have been a stale activist documentary into a film that feels compelling and that grabs you and that moves you, hopefully.
And you did use some reenactments, right? Scenes of helicopters landing and.
Well, that footage is actually we have kind of flashback footage of U.S. Special Operations Forces and American forces doing things. That's night vision footage. It's all real. It's just not from the. Films do. Lots of films use this archive of footage that's produced by the U.S. military. So the U.S. military films operations, and so when people are talking about the raiders coming in, we use real footage of American soldiers and helicopters coming into a compound. But the footage is sort of abstracted in a way to make it like almost a dream sequence. So, there's not the sense that this is literally that exact raid happening. It's just those kinds of American troops doing that kind of a raid in that kind of a moment.
But there are also, and then again, there are also parts of the movie where that look like documenting a war, where the reporter Jeremy is in the field, particularly in Yemen and Somalia. In the film, you spoke with an unlikely U.S. ally in Somalia, a warlord, and I wanted to ask you how you first connected with him. But before I get to that, I want to play a clip from the film. In this, he's leading you to the site of fierce fighting.
In an earlier life, Inda Ade had been America's enemy, offering protection to people on the U.S. kill list. But the warlord had since changed sides. He was now on the U.S. payroll and assumed the title of general.
So he's saying that the fiercest fighting that they're doing right now is happening right here. Okay.
The men fired across the rooftops, but it didn't make sense to me what we were doing here, or what the Americans were doing here, in Somalia, arming this warlord turned general for what seemed like a senseless war.
We gotta move. So these were Shabab fighters you buried here? If you capture a foreigner alive, you execute them on the battlefield?
Now, Jeremy, I wanted to ask you, Rick, I wanted to ask you what your immediate reaction was when you heard that this warlord who cooperates with the United States told you that they execute foreigners on the battlefield if they capture them alive.
We were absolutely stunned. We were stunned first. He walked us over to one of these ditches. It's a tunnel that the Shabab dug as a fighting position, and showed us, a pile of sand in the bottom. Said there are 2 dead bodies under there, people we just buried here. And the fact is that he was bragging about the fact that they executed on the battlefield. He was, he goes on to say, we need to show these people no mercy. It was. In Somalia, Somalia has been turned into a terrifying place by a couple of decades of covert war, and the fact that these kinds of characters have become our allies is just absolutely terrifying.
Right, and this film also explores the case of Anwar al-Awlaki, an American citizen who was killed by the U.S. drone strike in Yemen. How did the U.S. get to this point where target assassinations of U.S. citizens is an accepted war tactic?
That is one of the great questions that I think we hope the film raises, and we hope people will start debating. That in a 2-week period in Yemen, the U.S. government killed 3 American citizens without a trial, without presenting any evidence, without even a charge. None of these people had been charged with a crime. There was Anwar al-Awlaki, who was killed with Samir Khan, who published an Al-Qaeda-linked magazine out there. And then most tragic of all, 2 weeks later, Anwar al-Awlaki's 16-year-old son, who was innocent of anything, was a child, a minor, totally unimplicated in anything, and was taken out in a drone strike just like his father had been. It's a really terrifying moment to me. It's something I think. The most chilling part of this is the fact that there's no public debate about it. There could be. Osama bin Laden was charged with a crime. The American Taliban guy was given a trial, but when they killed Anwar al-Awlaki and Samir Khan without a trial, when they killed his son, it's mentioned in the press and it's sort of celebrated. It was Obama announced it to the press. I think it was at some ceremony for Gates, or I don't know. Anyway, he announced it to the press as a great moment in the American war on terror. And that was the way it was sort of presented in the press. Only now, I think we're beginning to have a public debate about how this can happen, because it's a terrifying kind of precedent. I mean, the American people need to know when the president has a right to assassinate them and when he doesn't. And we don't know that now.
Right. Now, finally, I wanted to have you tell us what's happening with the distribution of this film, when people might be able to see it, and also about the companion book that will be for sale soon.
So we're incredibly excited that we're working with IFC and Sundance Select, who are going to have this film with a broad release in theaters across the country beginning in June sometime. The exact date hasn't been quite locked yet, but it'll be early June out, and it's going to be across the country in theaters. And we can't be more elated about that. I mean, we were honestly kind of terrified, because as a journalist, you're always kind of making promises to the people who agree to talk to you. You know, you go into their house and you ask them to relive these horrifying, terrible moments, and you promise them that you're going to try to make their stories heard. You're going to try to tell their stories. And more often than not, no one listens, and they go nowhere. No one picks up the story. The piece doesn't end up airing somewhere, or it does, and no one watches it. But, I mean, thanks to IFC and Sundance Select, these stories and these people who took risks to talk to us, I mean, their images and their stories are going to be heard all over the place.
Okay, well, we'll have to leave it there.
Jeremy wrote a book by the same title, Dirty Wars, that is a massive 600-page, blistering expose of this war. It is going to be, Jeremy's too modest to tell himself, but it's the book on America's covert war on terror.
Okay.
It's coming out on April 27th.
Great.
So the book will be out on April 27th. There'll be a book tour, and the film will be out in early June.
And thank you so much for joining us. We've come to the end of this week's edition of Global Journalist. Joining us today was Jeremy Scahill, the writer and producer of Dirty Wars, and Richard Rowley, the director of Dirty Wars. Our program is produced by the Reynolds Journalism Institute and the Missouri School of Journalism. Our program is directed by Travis McMillan, audio by Pat Akers. Raymond Tungakar is our executive producer. Mikkel Christensen was our lead producer. Stay with us for Free Press Watch, and please join us again next week for another Global Journalist. I'm David Reed.
And now, Free Press Watch, a segment on Global Journalist where each week we bring you a rundown of major events affecting press freedom around the world. I'm Raymond Tungakar. We began in Cambodia, where the government is now attempting to restrict lawyers from speaking to the press. The Ministry of Information released new regulations that require lawyers to seek the Cambodian Bar Association's permission before speaking with the media, or else face the risk of expulsion. Observers worry the government's moves to silence lawyers will decimate the final check on Cambodia's longtime strongman, Prime Minister Hun Sen. In Burundi, police are attacking journalists that have been marching in support of one of their colleagues. The Burundian Press Corps has been marching since the 8th of January, when the Ministry of Justice denied the right of parole to the journalist Hassan Rivakuki, a correspondent for the Swahili service of Radio France International. He's been in prison since November 2011. The government arrested Rivakuki on charges of terrorist activities involving a gun attack on a Burundian rebel group. Rivakuki had interviewed the leader of that group 1 month before the attack. The BBC reports that initially Rivakuki was sentenced to life, but later a court reduced that to a 3-year sentence. In Israel, authorities have held a Palestinian cartoonist in custody for over a week without charges or access to legal counsel. The cartoonist, Mohammed Saba'aneh, has been held since mid-February when he was arrested by Israeli forces at a border crossing with Jordan, according to the Times of Israel. Saba'aneh works as a political cartoonist for the official newspaper of the Palestinian National Authority and has often depicted imprisoned and oppressed Palestinians in his work. The cartoonist was being investigated by Israeli authorities for providing information and services to unnamed hostile organizations before his arrest, according to the Committee to Protect Journalists. CPJ fears that the arrest is part of a larger crackdown against journalists by Israeli authorities. For more information on these and other events affecting press freedom around the world, please visit our website at globaljournalist.org. Thank you for joining us this week on Global Journalist. I'm Raymond Tungakar. See you next week.